Jake Miller's hands gripped the steering wheel as his truck climbed higher into the mountains. The city lights had disappeared hours ago, replaced by dense forest and winding roads that barely qualified as paths. His phone had lost signal 20 miles back, and honestly, that was exactly what he wanted. No emails. No calls. No notifications buzzing every 5 seconds demanding his attention. He was done with all of it. The cabin came into view just as the sun started setting behind the peaks. It looked rough, sure, but that was the point. Weathered wood, a stone chimney, windows that probably leaked when it rained. The realtor had warned him it needed work. She'd also mentioned something about it being empty for nearly 40 years, which Jake figured explained the dirt cheap price. Most people would see a money pit. Jake saw freedom. He killed the engine and just sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. Real silence, not the fake kind you get with noise-canceling headphones. No car horns. No sirens. No neighbors blasting music at 2 in the morning. Just wind moving through pine trees and the distant call of some bird he couldn't identify. This was going to work. It had to work. Jake grabbed his duffel bag and walked up to the front door. The key stuck in the lock, and he had to shoulder the door open, but he was in. The inside smelled like dust and time, but it was surprisingly clean. Someone had maintained it, at least a little. The main room had a couch that looked older than he was, a small kitchen area, and that massive stone fireplace the realtor had mentioned. He dropped his bag and looked around. The place felt bigger than it should. The ceiling stretched up higher than necessary, with thick wooden beams crossing overhead. Nice craftsmanship, actually. Someone had built this to last. As evening fell, Jake got a fire going and heated up some canned soup. His first meal in his new life. It tasted like freedom and sodium. He sat on the porch steps afterward, watching stars appear in numbers he'd forgotten existed. In the city, you could see maybe a dozen stars on a clear night. Here, the sky looked like someone had spilled glitter across black velvet. Yeah, this was going to work. He went inside as the temperature dropped, planning to crash early. That's when he noticed the fireplace still radiating heat, even though his small fire had burned out an hour ago. The stones felt warm to the touch, almost alive. Weird, but old buildings did weird things. Probably just retained heat well. Then he saw the marks. Deep gouges in the wooden beams above, like something with massive claws had gripped them. They ran in parallel lines, each groove as wide as his finger and deep enough to make the wood split. Jake stood directly underneath them, reaching up. Even on his toes, he couldn't get close. Whatever made those marks had to be at least 12 feet tall. His practical mind tried to rationalize it. Bears, maybe? But bears didn't climb inside houses and hang from ceiling beams. Plus, these marks looked old, worn smooth by time. He found more evidence as he explored. Scratches on the floorboards near the back wall, like something heavy had been dragged repeatedly. Sections of the floor reinforced with metal plates beneath the wood, as if the original boards couldn't support enough weight. And in the kitchen, the doorway had been widened at some point, the frame replaced with steel instead of wood. Jake found the cellar door behind a bookshelf. It took him 20 minutes to move the shelf, and when he did, he found a heavy wooden door with a lock that looked medieval. No key, but the door wasn't actually locked. It swung open with a groan that echoed down into darkness. Stairs led down. Not basement stairs. Cave stairs, carved directly into stone and descending way deeper than any normal foundation. Jake grabbed his flashlight and started down, his curiosity overriding his common sense. The temperature rose as he descended. The air smelled different too, like heated stone and something else he couldn't identify. Something ancient and organic. The stairs went down at least 50 feet before opening into a cavern so large his flashlight couldn't find the far walls. And that's when he saw it. Gold coins. Thousands of them, piled in heaps that glittered in his flashlight beam. Ancient weapons hung on the walls. Books and scrolls stacked in careful arrangements. Artifacts from civilizations Jake recognized from history classes and plenty he didn't. And in the center of it all, coiled around the largest pile of treasure like some mythical painting come to life, was a dragon. Its scales were deep bronze, each one the size of a dinner plate. The creature was massive, easily as long as a city bus, with wings folded against its sides and a tail that disappeared into the shadows. Its head rested on its front claws, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. Jake stood frozen, his brain refusing to process what he was seeing. Dragons weren't real. They were stories. Legends. Things that didn't exist outside of movies and fantasy novels. One golden eye opened, fixing on him with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware and undeniably annoyed. The dragon's voice rumbled through the cavern like distant thunder. You're standing in my living room, human. Jake's flashlight slipped from his fingers and clattered on the stone floor. And you, the dragon continued, lifting its enormous head, are trespassing. Jake's legs wanted to run, but his body wasn't cooperating. He just stood there, staring at a creature that shouldn't exist, while his brain tried desperately to reboot itself. The dragon shifted, and the sound of scales sliding across stone echoed through the cavern. It stretched its neck, vertebrae popping like a string of firecrackers, and yawned. Teeth the size of kitchen knives glinted in the dim light. Jake's survival instincts finally kicked in, and he took a step backward toward the stairs. Don't bother running, the dragon said, settling back down. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. Besides, you trip on those stairs and break your neck. These caves are treacherous for humans. Jake's mouth opened and closed a few times before words actually came out. You can talk. Brilliant observation. Yes, I can talk. I can also read 17 languages, solve complex mathematical equations, and apparently, I can fail at keeping humans out of my home. The dragon's tone carried the weight of someone deeply annoyed at life's inconveniences. My name is Valdris. And you are standing on property I purchased in 1967 through a series of shell corporations specifically to prevent this exact situation. But I bought this place, Jake managed. I have a deed. Legal documents. Valdris snorted, and a small puff of smoke escaped his nostrils. Let me guess. Mountain Vista Properties LLC? That's one of mine. The realtor is a human I pay very well to sell the cabin to people who never actually go through with the purchase. Most humans see the location, realize how isolated it is, and back out. You weren't supposed to actually show up. Jake's fear was slowly being replaced by indignation. So what, you've been scamming people? I've been protecting my privacy, Valdris corrected. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to exist in the modern world when everyone has cameras in their pockets? I've lived in these mountains for 3,000 years. These caves are my home. The cabin above is just a shell, a front to maintain legal ownership of the land and keep hikers and developers away. 3,000 years. Jake's mind struggled with the concept. This creature had been alive when ancient Rome was still expanding. When pyramids were still being built. When humans thought the earth was flat. Okay, Jake said slowly. So what happens now? You eat me? Roast me alive? Turn me into a pile of ash? Valdris tilted his massive head, studying Jake with those unsettling golden eyes. Tell me, human, why are you here? And don't say you wanted a vacation home. People don't buy falling apart cabins in the middle of nowhere for vacation. Jake hesitated, then figured honesty couldn't make things worse. I quit my job. Actually, I kind of had a breakdown in the middle of a board meeting and told my boss exactly where he could shove his quarterly projections. Spent 10 years in corporate finance, climbing the ladder, working 80-hour weeks. Then one day I woke up and couldn't remember the last time I felt anything except tired and angry. The dragon's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been understanding. You fled civilization. Yeah. I guess I did. Interesting. Valdris was quiet for a moment, then made a decision. I'm going to make you an offer, Jake Miller. Yes, I know your name. I read your purchase documents. Here's the situation, I could kill you, but that's messy and draws attention when you inevitably get reported missing. I could let you leave, but you'd tell people about me, and then I'd have to relocate, which is a tremendous hassle at my age. Or? Jake prompted. Or you stay, and we make an arrangement. Jake blinked. An arrangement. Valdris shifted his weight, and more gold coins cascaded down the pile. I've been isolated for too long. The world has changed in ways I struggle to understand. When I was last active in human society, your kind communicated with written letters that took weeks to deliver. Now you have these devices that let you talk to anyone, anywhere, instantly. I watch human news occasionally, and half of what I see makes no sense. Your politics, your technology, your culture, it's all evolved beyond my comprehension. You want me to explain the internet to a dragon, Jake said flatly. Among other things. I need a connection to the modern world. Someone who can help me understand what humanity has become. In exchange, I'll let you live here. The cabin, the land, complete isolation from the society you're running from. I'll even teach you things, if you're interested. I've accumulated quite a bit of knowledge over 3 millennia. Jake should have said no. Any sane person would have hiked straight back to civilization and checked themselves into therapy. But something about the offer appealed to him. Maybe it was the dragon's tone, which carried a loneliness Jake recognized in himself. Maybe it was the absurdity of the situation cutting through the depression that had been suffocating him for months. Or maybe he'd actually lost his mind and this was all a stress-induced hallucination. "What kind of things could you teach me?" he asked. Valdris gestured with one claw toward the books and scrolls. "History that was never written down. Lost sciences. Dead languages. I've watched civilizations rise and fall. I've preserved knowledge that humanity has forgotten. Plus, I can show you how to actually survive in these mountains without accidentally poisoning yourself with the wrong berries." That's oddly specific. The previous cabin owner in 1952 lasted 3 days before eating something that made him very sick. I had to secretly call for help. Very annoying. Despite everything, Jake felt a smile tugging at his mouth. The dragon had a personality, dry and sarcastic in a way that reminded him of his college professors. "And what do you get out of this besides internet tutorials?" "Company," Valdris admitted quietly. "I'm the last of my kind in this region. The others either died centuries ago or migrated to places even more remote. I've been alone for a very long time, and I'm starting to forget what conversation feels like." That settled it. Jake understood loneliness. He'd felt it every day in that office, surrounded by people but completely isolated. At least here, he'd be alone with purpose. "Okay," Jake said. "I'll stay. Teach you about the modern world. But I have conditions." The dragon's eyes gleamed with amusement. A human negotiating with a dragon. This should be entertaining. "I need to go back to town occasionally for supplies. And you don't eat me, obviously. Also, I get access to your library down here. If I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, I might as well learn something useful." Valdris considered, then nodded slowly. "Acceptable. Do we have an agreement?" Jake stepped forward and extended his hand, a gesture that felt ridiculous given the size difference. Valdris carefully extended one claw, and they shook. The dragon's scales felt warm and surprisingly smooth. "We have a deal," Jake said. "So, where should we start?" "How about you explain what TikTok is?" Valdris said. "I keep seeing references to it on the news, and I cannot for the life of me understand why humans film themselves dancing." Jake laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised him. "Oh man, this is going to take a while." 3 weeks passed faster than Jake expected. His days fell into a strange rhythm, mornings teaching Valdris about smartphones and streaming services, afternoons exploring the mountain trails, evenings reading ancient texts by firelight while the dragon shared stories from civilizations that existed before recorded history. It was weird, sure, but it was also the most peaceful Jake had felt in years. Then everything changed on a Tuesday morning. Jake was making coffee when his laptop started acting strange. The Wi-Fi signal, always weak this far out, suddenly got stronger. Way stronger. He frowned at the screen, watching the connection bars max out. That didn't make sense. The nearest cell tower was 15 miles away. He opened his network settings and felt his stomach drop. There were 6 new Wi-Fi networks showing up, all with names like Tactical Com1 and Mobile Unit 3. Military-grade encrypted connections. "Valdris," Jake called down into the cellar. "We've got a problem." The dragon climbed up from the cavern, his massive form somehow fitting through passages that seemed too small. Over the weeks, Jake had learned that Valdris could shift his body in ways that defied physics, compressing himself when needed. It was unsettling to watch. "What kind of problem?" Valdris asked. Jake turned the laptop around. "The kind with tactical communication networks. Someone set up shop nearby, and they're not hikers." Valdris's eyes narrowed. "The signals I've been sensing. I thought they were just increased cellular activity from the towns. But this is different. This is focused." Jake's old skills kicked in. Before the corporate job had drained his soul, he'd actually enjoyed his work in cybersecurity. He'd been good at it too, before the endless meetings and politics sucked out all the interesting parts. His fingers flew across the keyboard, probing the networks, looking for vulnerabilities. "These encryptions are government grade," he muttered. "But not actual government. The certificates are from a private contractor." He dug deeper, bypassing firewalls with techniques he'd learned years ago and definitely shouldn't still remember. "Got it. Axiom Corporation. They're a defense contractor. Big players in experimental weapons development." "Why would a weapons company be in these mountains?" Valdris asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Jake pulled up intercepted communication logs, his face going pale as he read. They detected something 3 weeks ago. Anomalous energy signatures, they're calling it. Readings that don't match any known natural phenomena. They've deployed a tactical assessment team to investigate and secure the source for study. They're looking for me. Yeah. Jake kept reading, his concern growing. They've got sensor equipment set up in a perimeter about 2 miles out. Thermal imaging, electromagnetic scanners, radiation detectors. Whatever you are, Valdris, you're lighting up their instruments like a Christmas tree. The dragon began pacing, his tail swishing with agitation. I could leave. Relocate deeper into the mountain range. They'd follow the readings. These guys aren't going to give up just because you move a few miles. Jake pulled up more files, hacking deeper into Axiom systems. Listen to this. They're calling you a potential high-value biological asset. They want to capture you, Valdris. Study you. They're talking about harvesting samples. Valdris's growl rattled the windows. Then I'll destroy them. I fought off worse threats than humans with their toys. And then what? Jake challenged. You kill a corporate tactical team, and suddenly you're not a myth anymore. You're a confirmed threat. Axiom will send more people. Then the government gets involved. Then the military. Social media would explode with footage. Within a week, you'd have every news helicopter in the country circling these mountains. You'd never have peace again. The dragon stopped pacing, considering. So what do you suggest? Jake stared at the screen, his mind working through possibilities. We fight them with something you can't. Information. Bureaucracy. The boring stuff that actually runs the modern world. Explain. Look, these guys are operating on data, right? Their sensors tell them something weird is here, so they investigate. But what if their data was wrong? What if we made them think their equipment was malfunctioning? Jake started typing, pulling up technical specifications for the sensor arrays Axiom was using. I can spoof their readings. Feed them false positives, make the signatures appear in multiple locations at once, or make them disappear entirely. Convince them their gear is broken. That would only buy time, Valdris pointed out. True. So we go deeper. Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing Axiom's internal network. We bury this entire operation under so much red tape and bureaucratic confusion that it gets shut down from the inside. I file false maintenance reports. Create budget discrepancies. Flag their mission for compliance reviews. Make it look like someone submitted fraudulent requisitions. The corporate world runs on paperwork, and I know how to make paperwork into a weapon. Over the next 72 hours, Jake barely slept. He worked around the clock, weaving a web of digital chaos through Axiom's systems. He rerouted their sensor data through filters that made the readings appear inconsistent. He triggered automatic safety protocols that flagged their equipment as potentially faulty. He created fake email chains suggesting the team leader had gone rogue and was wasting company resources on a personal project. Meanwhile, Valdris used his own abilities to help. He could manipulate electromagnetic fields, creating bursts of energy that appeared and disappeared randomly, miles apart. To Axiom's sensors, it looked like their equipment was picking up everything from solar flares to underground mineral deposits to plain old static. Jake watched the intercepted communications with satisfaction as confusion spread through the tactical team. Arguments broke out about equipment reliability. The team leader got a call from corporate demanding an explanation for the budget overruns Jake had fabricated. A compliance officer showed up unannounced, asking uncomfortable questions about authorization codes. It's working, Jake reported to Valdris on the 4th day. They're pulling out. Corporate's shutting down the operation pending an internal review of their sensor technology and project approval process. Through the window, Jake could see vehicles packing up in the distance, tiny dots moving through the forest. By sunset, the tactical networks had disappeared from his laptop scan. Valdris stood beside him, watching the retreat. You defeated them without violence. Without them ever knowing what they were actually looking for. That's the thing about the modern world, Jake said. Power isn't just about being strong anymore. It's about understanding systems. Knowing which buttons to push. A dragon can destroy an army, but a guy with a laptop can make that army never show up in the first place. Your species has become formidable in unexpected ways, Valdris observed. We've had to be. We can't breathe fire or fly, so we got creative. Jake closed his laptop, exhaustion finally hitting him. Though I've got to admit, having a dragon as backup made me feel a lot braver about hacking into a defense contractor's network. Valdris's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. You took significant personal risk to protect me. Why? Jake thought about it. Because you're my friend. And because you deserve to live in peace just like anyone else. Dragon or human, doesn't matter. The dragon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Thank you, Jake Miller. I have not had a friend in many centuries. I had forgotten what it felt like." "Yeah, well, don't get too sentimental," Jake said, trying to lighten the mood. "You still owe me an explanation about what happened to Atlantis. You keep promising that story and changing the subject." Valdris laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Very well. But you're not going to like the answer. It involves a volcanic eruption and human stubbornness." As they headed back inside, Jake felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't experienced since leaving his corporate job. He'd used his skills for something that mattered. Protected someone who needed help. Made a real difference. And he'd done it all from a cabin in the middle of nowhere, helping a 3,000-year-old dragon stay hidden from the modern world. Life was definitely weird now. But it was also pretty good. The weeks after the Axiom incident settled into something Jake could almost call normal, if you ignored the whole living with a dragon part. But one evening, as autumn started painting the mountains in shades of gold and red, Valdris approached him with an unusual request. "I want to show you something," the dragon said. "Something I haven't shared with a human in over 200 years. Jake looked up from the book he was reading, an ancient text about navigation techniques used by Polynesian sailors. "Should I be worried?" "Only if you're afraid of stairs." They descended into the cavern as usual, but instead of stopping at the main chamber with all the treasure, Valdris led him past it. The passage narrowed, then opened into another tunnel Jake had never noticed before. The air grew cooler, and the walls showed signs of careful carving, not natural formation. "How big is this cave system?" Jake asked, his voice echoing. "Bigger than you can imagine. I've spent centuries expanding it, digging deeper, creating space for what matters most to me." They walked for what felt like half a mile, descending gradually. Jake's flashlight beam caught glimpses of side passages branching off in multiple directions. Finally, they emerged into a chamber so vast that Jake's light couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls. Valdris breathed a small stream of fire, and torches along the walls ignited in sequence, revealing the space in sections. Jake's breath caught in his throat. It was a library. Not just any library, but something that belonged in a fantasy movie. Shelves carved directly into the stone walls stretched up 30 feet high, packed with books, scrolls, and tablets. Reading desks were positioned throughout the space, each one human-sized. Maps covered entire wall sections, showing continents with unfamiliar coastlines. Display cases held artifacts that museums would kill for. "This is impossible," Jake whispered, walking forward in a daze. "This is 3,000 years of collecting," Valdris corrected. "Everything humanity has created that I deemed worth saving. Books that were burned during the Library of Alexandria. Mathematical texts from ancient India that predate your modern number system. Medical knowledge from Chinese dynasties that discovered things your scientists are only now rediscovering. Poetry from cultures that disappeared before they could develop writing systems, which I transcribed from oral traditions." Jake ran his fingers along the spines of books, seeing titles in languages he recognized and dozens he didn't. "Why keep all this hidden?" Valdris settled onto the floor, his massive form somehow looking smaller in this space. "Because your species has a terrible habit of destroying what it creates. Wars, religious purges, book burnings, political revolutions. Every few centuries, humans decide that certain knowledge is dangerous or heretical, and they try to erase it. I've watched it happen over and over." Jake pulled out a book at random. The pages were handwritten in Latin, with detailed anatomical drawings that looked centuries ahead of their time. "So you've been saving our history from ourselves." "Someone had to." The dragon's voice carried a weight of sadness. "You humans are brilliant and creative, but you're also self-destructive. You build wonders, then tear them down. You discover profound truths, then forget them. I started this library after watching the burning of the Library of Alexandria. I was younger then, more idealistic. I thought if I could preserve the knowledge, perhaps future generations would learn from the past." "Did they?" Jake asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Rarely. Humans keep making the same mistakes, just with better technology." Valdris gestured toward a section of scrolls. Those contained treatises on sustainable agriculture from a civilization that thrived for 800 years before collapsing due to environmental mismanagement. Your modern world is facing similar issues, but the knowledge to avoid catastrophe has been sitting here, unused, for a millennium. Jake felt a pang of something, guilt maybe, or frustration at his entire species. Why not share it? Publish it somehow? And reveal myself? The moment I emerge, I become a curiosity, a specimen, a threat. Governments would want to control me. Scientists would want to study me. And in the chaos, this library would be picked apart, sold to the highest bidders, locked away in private collections or government vaults. At least here, it's safe. Jake wandered deeper into the library, overwhelmed by the scope of it. He found a section dedicated to languages, complete with grammar guides for tongues that had been dead for thousands of years. Another area held scientific texts, including what looked like early chemistry experiments and astronomical observations. Then he found the art section, and his heart ached. Paintings, carefully preserved, showing styles and techniques that had vanished from human knowledge. Sculptures depicting gods from forgotten religions. Music, written in notation systems that predated modern sheet music. You've been alone with all this, Jake said quietly. For how long? The last human I shared this with was a scholar in 1804. He stumbled into my caves while fleeing persecution. I let him study here for 3 years before he died of old age. Since then, I've been the only one who walks these halls. Jake turned to look at the dragon, really seeing him for the first time. Not as a mythical creature or a dangerous entity, but as someone carrying an unbearable burden. Thousands of years of knowledge, centuries of loneliness, an entire library filled with humanity's lost potential, and no one to share it with. That's why you made the deal with me, Jake realized. Not just to understand the modern world. You were lonely. Valdris didn't deny it. Dragons aren't meant to be social creatures. We're territorial, solitary by nature. But 3,000 years is a long time, even for us. I've watched my kind disappear, one by one. Some died in conflicts with humans. Others simply left, flying to remote places where civilization would never reach. A few are left, scattered across the world, but we rarely communicate. We're a dying species, Jake. And I'm tired of being the last guardian of knowledge that no one will ever use. Jake sat down on one of the reading benches, processing everything. What happened? Why did dragons go into hiding? Because we were tyrants once, Valdris admitted. Thousands of years ago, we ruled over humans. We were stronger, smarter in some ways, longer lived. We thought that gave us the right to dominate. We hoarded resources, demanded tribute, destroyed anyone who resisted. We were everything the old legends say we were. So what changed? We realized we were stunting your development. Humanity couldn't grow, couldn't reach its potential, while living under our claws. Some dragons didn't care. But others, myself included, we saw something in your species. Creativity. Adaptability. The potential to become something greater than you were. So we made a choice. We withdrew. Let humanity chart its own course, for better or worse. And you've been watching ever since, Jake said. Preserving our history, protecting our knowledge, while staying hidden so we could be free. Yes. Though lately, I've wondered if it mattered. If isolation was the right choice, or just cowardice dressed up as nobility. Jake stood and walked back to Valdris, looking up at the ancient creature. It mattered. All of this matters. You've kept humanity's memory alive, even when we forgot it ourselves. That's not cowardice. That's hope. Valdris's eyes met his. Hope for what? That someday we'd be ready to learn from our mistakes. That we'd grow up enough to deserve this second chance you've been protecting. Jake gestured at the library. Maybe I can help. Start documenting some of this. Create digital archives. Find ways to share the knowledge without exposing you. You'd do that. I came to these mountains to escape humanity, Jake said. But you've reminded me why humanity's worth saving in the first place. We're messy and destructive, sure, but we're also capable of creating beautiful things. And you've spent 3,000 years believing in that potential, even when we didn't believe in ourselves. The dragon was quiet for a long moment. Then he lowered his head, bringing himself closer to Jake's level. Thank you, Jake Miller. For understanding. For staying. For being a friend when I'd forgotten what friendship felt like. Jake smiled. Besides, someone needs to organize this place. Your filing system is a disaster. Valdris laughed, the sound echoing through the ancient library. I'm 3,000 years old. I have my own system. Your system is pilot wherever there's space. That's not a system, that's chaos. As they argued good-naturedly about organizational methods, Jake felt something shift inside him. He'd come here broken, running from a life that had drained him dry. But maybe he'd found something better. A purpose. A partnership. A chance to help preserve something that actually mattered. 2 months of peace shattered on a cold November morning. Jake was in the library, carefully photographing pages from a medieval manuscript about herbal medicine, when his laptop started screaming alerts. Every security program he'd installed was going off simultaneously. He ran up to the cabin, Valdris following behind with the kind of speed that still surprised Jake despite everything. "What is it?" the dragon asked. Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard, his face going pale. "Axiom Corporation. They're back. And they brought friends." The screen showed intercepted communications, satellite imagery, and equipment manifests. This wasn't a small tactical team anymore. This was a full military-style operation. 3 helicopters, 24 personnel, heavy equipment, and weaponry that made Jake's stomach turn. "How did they find us again?" Valdris growled. "You buried that operation." "I buried the investigation, but I couldn't erase all their data. Someone high up at Axiom must have reviewed the old sensor readings and decided they were worth a second look." Jake pulled up more files, hacking into Axiom's network with practiced ease. "Oh no. This is bad. Their CEO, Richard Bennett, is personally funding this mission. He's convinced that whatever you are could be worth billions. Advanced biological materials, unique energy generation, maybe even weapons applications." "Then I'll fight them," Valdris said, his scales beginning to glow with heat. "I've avoided conflict, but I won't be captured and dissected." "Wait." Jake was reading something, his eyes widening. "If you fight them, Bennett has a contingency plan. Live news crews on standby. The second anything happens, he broadcasts footage of you to the world. He wants you exposed. Either he captures you and studies you in secret, or you resist and he proves dragons exist. Then he becomes the man who discovered mythical creatures, gets book deals, speaking tours, government contracts." "Quite the strategy," Valdris admitted darkly. "So if I fight, I lose my anonymity. If I don't fight, I lose my freedom." Jake stared at the screen, his mind racing through options. They were outgunned, outmanned, and out of time. The strike team would reach the cabin within 2 hours. Every conventional solution led to disaster. Then an idea hit him. A crazy, risky, absolutely insane idea. "What if we give them exactly what they want?" Jake said slowly. "Explain quickly." "They want proof you exist. They want fame and fortune from discovering a dragon. So we give them that proof, but we control the narrative. We expose everything before they can." Jake's fingers started flying across the keyboard. "Bennett's been operating illegally. Trespassing on protected land, planning to capture an intelligent being without any legal authority, misusing corporate funds for personal gain. I've got evidence of all of it from their own files. And that helps us how? Because we don't just expose you. We expose him. We release everything simultaneously. Sensor data proving you exist, footage of their illegal operation, Bennett's communications showing intent to capture and experiment on an intelligent life form, financial records showing corporate fraud. We flood every news outlet, every social media platform, every government agency all at once." Valdris considered this. "The world would know I exist." "Yeah. But they'd also know that a corporation tried to kidnap you illegally. We frame this as a conservation issue, a rights issue, maybe even a first contact scenario. You're not a monster to be hunted. You're an intelligent being defending your home from corporate raiders. That's a massive gamble, Jake. Once my existence is public, there's no going back." "I know." Jake met the dragon's eyes. "But staying hidden forever isn't working anymore. Technology gets better every year. Eventually, someone else will find you. Maybe we can't stop you from being discovered, but we can control how the world learns about you." Valdris was quiet for a long moment, centuries of caution warring with the reality of their situation. Finally, he nodded. "Do it. But we do this together. I won't hide while you take all the risk." They spent the next 90 minutes preparing. Jake assembled a massive data package, everything from satellite footage showing Axiom's approach to financial documents proving Bennett's illegal use of company resources. He included sensor readings that proved Valdris's existence without revealing his exact location. He wrote a narrative explaining the situation, framing it as a corporation attempting to capture an intelligent, peaceful being for profit. Meanwhile, Valdris used his abilities to create a spectacular electromagnetic display over the mountains. Visible for miles, documented by dozens of phones in nearby towns. Undeniable proof that something extraordinary existed. At exactly noon, Jake hit send. The data package exploded across the internet. Major news networks received it simultaneously. Social media lit up with footage of the light show. Government environmental agencies got detailed reports of illegal corporate activities on protected land. Jake had even sent packages to international outlets, ensuring the story went global immediately. Within 20 minutes, news helicopters were circling, but they weren't focused on finding Valdris. They were focused on the Axiom strike team, which suddenly found themselves surrounded by cameras and federal rangers demanding to know what authority they had to be conducting military operations on federal land. Jake and Valdris watched it unfold on the laptop, staying safely hidden in the cabin. "It's working," Jake said, watching Bennett's carefully planned operation collapse into legal chaos. "The Forest Service is shutting them down. FBI's opening an investigation into corporate fraud. And look, environmental groups are already calling for protection of your territory as a habitat for an endangered intelligent species." News anchors were going crazy trying to explain the story. Some called it a hoax. Others debated the ethics of attempting to capture an unknown creature. Scientists weighed in about the possibility of undiscovered species. Legal experts argued about what rights an intelligent non-human being might have. It was chaos, but controlled chaos. The kind Jake had orchestrated. By sunset, Axiom's team had been forced to withdraw. Bennett was facing multiple investigations. And the world was having a very loud, very public conversation about whether a dragon had rights. "Your species is handling this better than I expected," Valdris observed, watching news coverage. "I thought there would be more panic. Humans are weird. We've been telling dragon stories for thousands of years. Part of us always wanted to believe. Now that we know it's real, everyone's more excited than scared." Jake scrolled through social media. "Look, there's already fan accounts for you. Someone made a hashtag, Save Valdris. That's actually kind of wholesome." "I'm trending on Twitter," the dragon said with disbelief. "I've lived for 3 millennia, and I'm trending on Twitter." Jake laughed. "Welcome to the modern world." The next few days were surreal. Government representatives reached out through encrypted channels, wanting to establish communication. Scientists requested permission to study Valdris's habitat non-invasively. Environmental lawyers offered to help establish legal protections. Jake handled it all, filtering requests, scheduling virtual meetings, being the diplomatic bridge between an ancient dragon and contemporary society. It was stressful and exhausting, but also exhilarating. He was using every skill he'd developed in his corporate life, except now it was for something that actually mattered. One evening, after a particularly long video conference with a UN Committee on Non-Human Intelligence, Jake found Valdris standing outside the cabin, watching the sunset. "Regretting going public?" Jake asked. "No. Surprisingly, no." The dragon's voice was thoughtful. "For 3,000 years, I've hidden, convinced that exposure would mean destruction. But your generation is different. Not perfect, certainly. But willing to at least consider that something unknown doesn't have to be something feared. We're getting there. Slowly. Making mistakes along the way. That's all any species can do." Valdris looked at Jake. "You gave up your isolation to help me. The peace you came here seeking." Jake shrugged. "Turns out isolation wasn't what I needed. I needed purpose. Connection. A reason to use my skills for something good." He smiled. "Plus, I've got the world's most interesting roommate. That's got to be worth something." "What happens now?" Valdris asked. "Now? We figure it out together. Maybe we slowly share some of that library knowledge with the world. Maybe we help humanity learn from its past mistakes. Maybe we just live here and occasionally do video calls with scientists who want to ask you about ancient civilizations." Jake looked out at the mountains, painted in shades of orange and purple by the setting sun. "The point is, we've got options now. You're not alone anymore. Neither of us are." Valdris nodded slowly. "A new beginning, then. For both of us." "Yeah. A new beginning." They stood together in comfortable silence, an unlikely partnership between species and centuries. Jake had come to these mountains seeking an ending, an escape from a world that had broken him. Instead, he'd found a friend, a purpose, and a future he never could have imagined. Sometimes the best adventures start when you stop running and start living. Even if living means sharing a cabin with a 3,000-year-old dragon who still doesn't fully understand memes. Jake wouldn't have it any other way.